strengthens India's space program, but also creates employment opportunities, fosters innovation and drives economic growth. And ladies and gentlemen, the time duration of the session is approximately 1 hour 20 minutes, which includes the opening and closing remarks by the chair and moderator, presentations, addresses, discussions with all our eminent speakers, and in the end, we will have question and answer session if the time permits. With those words, I hand over to our chair and moderator, Dr. B.S. Hegre. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, the Master of Events, for having nicely introduced all of us. Ever since government announced the reforms to space sector about 3 years ago, on inviting more and more participation from industry in all space sector activities in the country. How we do it, what we do for industry to take more active role has been a buzz kind of feeling, most discussed, most talked about. And especially in this hall, where policy-related issues or sessions only are planned, I've been sitting all the time here, and I feel probably what we're going to discuss, a good bit of that is covered, how we make industry participation happen more. So the focus is on really making the participation of industries work in the country, or Indian space program in the coming years, where industries will do probably total end-to-end manufacturing. We will have a robust ecosystem where industries, along with industries, work together. Industries with government will work together, and in that process we will not only strengthen the country's space program to create employment opportunities, foster innovation, and ultimately become a part of the global space industry ecosystem. So I welcome our distinguished panelists from this side, Mr. Lakshmesh, who heads the space and end of the day, we have to contribute to economic growth of the country. And of course, space economy, as we hear, by 2040 is slated to be around 1 trillion, and today stands around, say, 450, 460, 500, all figures, but definitely around 500 billion globally. By 2040, it is envisaged to be doubled, and that is the time we should aim to clinch a good share of that. This can be taken. So, in fact, it is not that I had all the tacit knowledge. I Googled, looked into the space policy. Almost all space policies available for countries across the world. I downloaded, went through them, and how did they really foster the growth of industry into space ecosystem over the years? I tried to summarize. See, one thing is, if you take the case of US, in the last 10 to 15 years, they have 7 to 8 discrete policies which they have put in place, many of them with the seal of the White House, which just proliferates like anything. See, policy and regulatory framework is most important for industry to grow and take active part. So we have to have a favorable policy, regulatory framework, which encourages private sector participation, promotes investment, and fosters innovation. The framework should provide clarity, lots of clarity actually, stability, and incentive for the companies to engage in space activities. See, unless you incentivize them, they won't come forward, because for years we have been telling space is a capital incentive, low volume industry. The scenario is changing now, but then still the government has to have a program to incentivize industry to come and get into space wholeheartedly. Skill development is most important, because every educational institution, every educational course should start teaching space. What it can do for society, what it can do for technology, in every respect. So skill development and education should be emphasized. It should be built into all kinds of curricula appropriately. Now, since you see, space programs all over the world have started by various governments only as national program, governmental program. Over a period of time, they have looked in more and more industry. So, government has to have adequate incubators set up for startups to, easily access, any startup which starts a company today, or youngsters who come out of the college with a lot of hopes, they are not expected to be setting up, all kinds of test facilities, all kinds of. So there should be that kind of facilities set up by the government, which should be made accessible by these startups easily. And incentives and grants is a must. See, actually the Europe model, they started really encouraging the universities, education institutions through announcement of opportunities, through small funding. So in the process, really it became, quite convenient for them, because a lot of innovations, newer technologies came out of Europe, but then they didn't multiply or capitalize it. Maybe the US guys, the typical entrepreneurial mode, they took over and started enhancing the numbers of each product. So technology transfer and transfer of IP is yet another important step in roping in more and more industry. In fact, this is one thing heavily debated, I know even within ISRO, but I am of the strong opinion that since all technologies we have developed at the cost of taxpayers' money, it should be made available to multiple people who are interested to take space technology, because in the last few years, my post-retirement in 2021, I had a long innings in ISRO, more than 4.5 decades. But when I came out, of course, even within ISRO, I was interacting with industry. Technology transfer, you see, even if we transfer all the technology of subsystems and systems to industries today, it is difficult. Many of the technologies related to our subsystems may or may not find market elsewhere. And no industry can come forward and take our technology only trusting that ISRO will buy back from me. It will not work out. So our technology should be transferred to industries, and we should handhold, means ISRO should handhold Indian industry and develop it further and make it compatible or contemporary with equivalent global systems. Then only we can enter global markets. See, today in the supply chain, hopefully Krishna will tell that, there are hardly any Indian product in this satchel database, which can go global. So that's an important step. Then we should have appropriate export promotion policies, hoping that ISRO, or hoping that Indian industry produced space product is capable of finding market outside. There shouldn't be much of hassles for industry to export. So single window, ease of doing business, whatever you tell would be fine. Then of course, outreach and awareness program. So with all these, now where do we really stand? I mean, last two sentences from me. See, today globally, there are about 10,500 much recognized space industries are said to be, okay? These are all from the authentic databases. And out of these 10,500 industries globally, 52% of them, nearly 5,600, are in the United States. Of course, we should also appreciate that the annual space budget is more than 40 billion, okay? And the immediate next is UK, which has got about 620 industries. Now, China, Germany, Canada, Japan, all are in the 3 to 4% of these 10,500 odd industries which are recognized recognized globally. Now, US space budget is about 40 billion, and we are, much less. But China, of course, has a larger space budget, but still 2.7% of global industry, private industry, is supposed to be working in the Chinese space program. So, obvious that India's space budget should be enhanced for about 1.4 billion to a sizable thing. Otherwise, expecting that we will become soon a recognizable part of the trillion-dollar economy, space economy, will be a myth. Because everywhere, government is anchor customer, in US or Europe or wherever. See, in Europe till recent, the European governments had certain percent of share in European space industries. Recently, they have made space industries independent, even Airbus, Thales Alenia and all that. In US, government supports all industries with advanced, huge orders, whether it is SpaceX, Capella, Maxar, or Hawkeye, anybody. And the last important thing is, I find a bit of hesitation or taboo in India, the civilian space program, the strategic space program. So according to me, they are not yet coming to the same table. But as far as industry is concerned, it shouldn't make any difference because everywhere else, the civilian and defense space needs are integrated. Only at the final level of using them, they get bifurcated. Because in the first session I heard, if an industry designs a satellite, my in-space friend told that, that design has to be seen carefully, and really we can't see now. Because as I told you, since putting up a spacecraft together today is a supply chain based activity, one cannot split or break the subsystem and start seeing all that. And what is built into the chip or embedded system, it's very difficult to see. See, we should be practical. If we start with this kind of taboo, it will become extremely difficult. And I think with this note, I will request our distinguished panelists to make their remarks and about 8 to 10 minutes or whatever.
Number 2, Larsen & Toubro is a nation-building company, and therefore we just cannot not afford to be in this critical sector. The time is now for industrializing this sector. Now, before I get to the industrialization, I just want to capture my own views on what is industrialization. There's one technical aspect of industrialization, and I think there is another important aspect as industrialization to me means to make a sector economically significant, and therefore it is a national agenda. Industrialization to me means to actually build the demand, build the market, so that the economy of that particular sector grows up. Industrialization, according to me, is all about extensively reorganizing the sector and those which help in building the sector and kind of ironing out the challenges which are inhibiting the growth of the sector. So these are 3 main agendas. Now when it comes to the various elements of industrialization, as I said, to make it economically significant, that means fundamentally we are talking about what has been a technological fantasy. We need to convert it into a truly industrial grade economic contributor. So specifically, one is, of course, what's not being done is the policies and the push and the reforms from the country. Number 2 is about the technology intensive sector. Third item is capital. capital is a means and capital is also an end. So therefore, it needs to be a means. And in a sector where it is capital intensive, the returns are, the gestation periods are longer. And very important is there must be a failure tolerance built into capital management in this particular sector.
The Minister for Space, Lord David Willett, he had come to ISRO, and I understand he went around some other space agencies to study the model. And when he came to ISRO, I had the privilege of taking him to show our satellite center, eyesight and all. He said, no, we are not going to do any such thing like you guys, because you have built too much of facility within the government. Our first priority is to make a most workable space policy. We will set up UK Space Center. Starting point would be space policy. And we will make the space policy such that industries from all over Europe will be able to comfortably come to UK and set up their industries. But we will provide for infrastructure. We will see that the ecosystem grows. And today, Harwell is a testimony for that. And they have the Harwell marketing team, Catapult, who came last year. So, if one starts with a clear-cut directive, it's much better. And Australia is starting the same way. But Australia, the government is investing the money for industries to do space activity with a condition that some 70 or 75% of the investment should happen within Australia. 25% you go for partnerships. So, if you start with a clear cut, but then India has chosen to probably work like what US did in the beginning. We started totally governmental space program and we kept it slightly longer with the government, to be honest, which we all see today. Maybe we are slow by 10, 15 years too. So I think as we move along, things should fall in place, but then we should go at really quick pace, as His Excellency also pointed out this morning. I think with this I will request Dr. Govindarajan to give his views on the whole topic.
Thank you, sir. As Mr. Exposition mentioned, as we have been hearing, the space sector is generally dominated by government itself, whatever. I think out about 178 missions that happened, 90 were from private sector. And out of that 90, about 61 I think from SpaceX. Point is, that means nearly 50% of the space missions that happened last year were contributed by private sector. That means the shift is happening from government to private, which should be an encouragement for the private industries to plunge into space sector. When it comes to industrialization, I think what we need to look at, I generally talk about the basics. Basics is this architecture. If you really talk about space architecture, we have to see who are the players in that architecture. Players obviously will be the government, the industries, service providers, regulators, policymakers. If we all agree that they are all players in that architecture, obviously all the players have to participate. When I say that they have to participate, means we cannot say that you do it, everybody should say that I will do it. So if in an industrialization, the policy also, as we have been talking, plays an important role. But in my opinion, who makes the policy? The government, obviously. The private industry, they always contribute towards the making of the policy. At the end of the day, somebody will take the decision and make the policy. In my opinion, policy only exhibit the mindset of the government towards that sector. It is the responsibility of the other players in that architecture or the ecosystem to implement that policy?
Go a little back, like centuries back. So the communication a few centuries ago used to happen through messengers or letters. Now it's going towards satellite in the orbit. Your survey used to happen through balloons. Now it's going again to like satellite. And in the coming years, this internet will also be via satellites. So what does it say? It says that the three aspects of securing national interest, observing and connecting people, the three major aspects are going to the space. And with this, the space is what we are moving towards land-based resource institution to a space-based resource institution. And as the numbers suggest by some reports in the coming years, that it will be, the satellite launches will be about 1,000 annually. And these are going towards LEO and very low Earth orbit. The satellites lifespan will be around like 3.5 to 4 years. So it means that a company will have 4 years to do R&D and request for manufacturing to develop an advanced version of the existing constellation. And going by this one company's requirement, there will be multiple other companies which will then need a lot of manufacturing capabilities within a state. They will need testing facility, they will need manufacturing facility, they will also need companies building electronic components, their propulsion. And further, they will also need, all this institution will need human resources. It comes down to, like institution producing such talents to cater to this requirement. So having said that, this will also require a certain aspect of having a policy that will shape up the entire industry in the orbit. Going forward, when we have multiple satellites in the orbit, we will also need certain collision avoidance module, again from manufacturing capacity. It will lead to the emergence of new verticals like space insurance to a great extent. It will also lead to certain strategic development because, see, the thing is, we are going towards a resourceful medium in space. There will be critical satellites important for a state to function. What happens when the particular satellite is out in the open? Countries today certain countries don't follow any rules, they will just have the clear aspect to take it down. So how do we secure our institution in space? Again, there will be a requirement of escort satellites. Again, a manufacturing demand. So the way we are moving towards orbit, there is certain shift from land towards the upwards. And all this requirement, like stalwarts, like the LND will also literally lift all these weights from land to the orbit. And having said that, it's great that when I speak to people, when I speak to government industries, they are saying yes, this is the way to go, and they are also looking forward to build such manufacturing capacity in India. And as going forward, the first thing that a country like India can do is have a centralized policy for space parks. Like we have SEZs, just like there are certain space parks where they can call all the people, all the industry people for setting up AIT and research institutes and everything within one aspect, within one cluster. This will just boost the indigenous manufacturing capability of India in this space segment. Not only that, it will also attract foreign investment in the state. Apart from that, it will also reduce a lot of logistical aspects for a company to build and launch their own satellites in the space. So there are certain interests that I'm also understanding from the panels, from the people here, and looking forward to see this coming out and most promising aspect through the policy. And having said that, look forward to listening to you and look on to answering your questions. Thank you.
We specialize in spacecrafts, we specialize in anything that you see inside a aircraft, whether it is civil or military. We also specialize in ammunition, which is missiles, which will be music to my friend from LFD. So what we have realized is, from an industrialization point of view, and particularly because we've seen the kind of friendship and kind of strategic partnership between two countries, United States and India. I was in the Prime Minister's last 2 weeks visit in the US. A very, very specific, strategic agreement has been reached between the two countries in collaboration. One of the sectors that we had seen was closely guarded between both countries, particularly the United States, was releasing any kind of technology outside the United States in the space sector. On the defense sector, we have been working with the US government to kind of ease out the ITAR restrictions, licensing restrictions, so that we can partner with Indian countries, Indian companies, and localize them in the country. We have done that to some extent. Some components have started to come in. We are further looking at expanding this relationship. As Raytheon Technologies, we were the first foreign OEM to start local manufacturing in India. I don't know how many of you are aware, the Sikorsky helicopter facility that we had at JV with Tata in Hyderabad was really the first kind of an OEM-led defense manufacturing in the country. We subsequently sold Sikorsky to Lockheed Martin, but then we were the first companies to start manufacturing in the country for the simple reason we thought that on a longer trajectory, India gave us the best cost country advantages. India gave us the best labor, educated English, like you mentioned, probably 80% of that funding and investment has to be within the United States. Maybe it's time now for India to look at those kind of fundings. Department of Science and Technology can be a backup to this whole thing, and that's what we're trying to tell the government, that you need to provide funding for the research and development. If you want this ecosystem to come up, if you want our Indian industry to join the supply chain of global players like us, they need to have a long tail of funding. Capital was mentioned. Capital is important. If you do not have capital, where is the private sector going to generate the fund from? By borrowing at 11%, 10% from the banks, and then run a business which doesn't give you a guarantee for business? That maths is not going to work out. So we are in talks with the government. There's a whole lot of committee members who are advising the government, and government is also interacting with the industry. We feel possibly that the startups probably should be insulated from the space sector at this point in time and not get exposed to the government machinery at this point in time until and unless they have absolute surety from the government that your whatever you design or whatever you come out with, there will be a way to fit it into the industry. There are ecosystems where in Telangana we have the T-hubs, wherein we engage with the startups and we give them a reverse challenge, which means that for example, I have to develop a product. The product is already mature and developed, let's say a jet engine component or a spacecraft component. The challenge with me is that product is being manufactured in the United States or in a very high labor cost market at this point in time. If I have to design something more superior, something more efficient, something more cost effective, we give the reverse option to the startups. That can you come up with a better design? Can you come out with a kind of a low cost, more efficient product design? And we guarantee that we'll pick it up from you.
I think Samit, you made extremely valuable points. Yes, I mean, government is required to be an anchor customer of industry to buy back the products or assure industry that go ahead, develop a product, certain numbers we will buy, we will take, some such thing is necessary. See, in US, we are all seeing that there is no taboo about private startup, there is no taboo going to industry. You see SpaceX, the life-saving grant, when 3 of Falcon 9, Falcon failed, and the life-saving grant was given by NASA as an advance contract, then only successes. And today when a SpaceX launch takes place, SpaceX control room is different, and Johnson Space Center in Houston fully supports. We are all aware that the historic Cape Canaveral Launchpad 39A and 40 are extensively used by SpaceX. Okay, whether it is for carrying a private astronaut, privately funded astronaut, or NASA astronaut, or from some other country. And of most eventually that kind of thing might be required. And now, of course, SIA in collaboration with some universities and NIAS are trying to promote an activity, a space research initiative. It's in very, very preliminary stages, I know, working to see that, some industry-ready workforce will be created. I mean, promoting that activity, making some contents, but I think Mr. Lakshmesh can throw more light on this because as one of the flagship projects of the country in hand.
Yeah, I think I'll try to respond to the first question about benchmarking.
That's right.
Benchmarking is certainly a good thing. Now, whether you want to benchmark a country or look at the good parts of what different countries have done in their own space agenda and how they have kind of woven them into their country's agenda. I think India is also doing its own bit of space strategy and probably picking up the best of what has happened elsewhere, because if you look at the liberalization or the reforms in the space sector happened in India maybe let us say 2020 and 2023, but something of this has happened in US probably 15-20 years back. And then the Europe happened, then China, there are a lot of things. There's enormous amount of learning that has come by the various countries which have gone ahead with liberalization of space. I think space has been the last of the sectors in each country to liberalize. It's a good amount of learning there, and therefore some of the institutional processes that has been set in India, I believe, are through the learnings which has come from various other countries. The second part is, yes, there is no specific stream at an engineering level, but however now IIT Mumbai, IIT Madras, of course the Indian Institute of Space Technologies is there at Trivandrum, and then there are about 3 or 4 other different universities, including some of the IITs, have come up with typical, a very specific space-based engineering, both as major as well as minor. So, and what Dr. Hegde mentioned about is how do we transform these the engineers into directly contributable employees of an organization. And that is where we today have enormous amount of relationship between academia and industry. And we are working on multiple joint programs wherein which we engage the youngsters or the students from colleges, both at undergrad level, graduation level, and very important thing is we also engage faculty. Because it's essential that we feel that the faculty who are teaching the youngsters must have an industry exposure themselves. Yeah.
From 10:15 p.m. onwards in Regency Ballroom 3. All the startups are requested to assemble there at the tea break time from 3.